E agora, para falar um pouquinho sobre como usar a tecnologia para que os humanos e os transhumanos que estão vindo aí, para que eles vivam harmonicamente, eu quero chamar o nosso próximo palestrante, ele que é sul-coreano, especialista em TI e pesquisador do transhumanismo. Ele começou a programar computadores com 10 anos de idade. Eu não sei o que você estava fazendo com 10 anos de idade, ele já estava programando computadores e trabalha com TI há 20 anos, tem uma grande experiência em desenvolvimento de estratégias tecnológicas e adoção de tecnologias inovadoras para grandes empresas internacionais. Por favor, suba aqui Robert Anderson. Uma salva de palmas para ele. You're welcome. You can take the mic there. Yeah, the mic is here. Here.
What is the future of the human species? To answer this, we need to first look back into the past. Around 200 BC, there was a Roman general by the name of Marcus Sergius, who led Rome into many battles. And because of this, he had encountered no less than 23 injuries. And because of these injuries, he lost his right hand. Now, back then, when you had lost a hand, you were expected to retire from the battlefield. But not Marcus Sergius. What he had done was have an artificial hand made out of iron, and he used this to carry his shield. He then went into many more battles and became famous for his iron hand. This is the first time where it was recorded that a person had used an artificial limb. Humans throughout history have been trying to repair the wrongs of their human bodies. Here are some other examples. In 1284 AD, an Italian by the name of Salvino da Marti had created the first pair of wearable eyeglasses. This was nothing more than two magnifying glasses joined together by a hinge in the middle. In 1891, Themistocles Gluck performed the first hip transplant, where he used ivory to replace the natural bone. In 1926, Mark Lidwell engineered the first artificial pacemaker. This pacemaker required you to stab a needle through your chest into your heart. Thankfully, future pacemakers would do away with this requirement. In 1969, Domingo Leotta and Denton Cooley transplanted the first artificial heart into a human in Houston, Texas. Today, humans are still finding new ways of repairing the human body. The only difference between then and now is the amount of technology that is available to us. I'm Robert Anderson, and ever since I can remember, I have loved technology. And the thing that I have loved most about technology is its potential to improve the lives of everyday people everywhere. And nowhere is there more potential for this than in transhumanism. Transhumanism is a belief that humans will no longer be confined to the natural limitations of the human body, but will be enhanced through genetics, through medicine, through technology. Now, my specialty is technology, so for me, transhumanism is the place where humans and technology start merging into a single being. And these technological enhancements will cause differentiations between groups of people. And as we all know, where there are differences between groups of people, these differences are used to drive prejudices, to drive division to drive judgment. History is full of examples of one group of humans judging another group of humans as inferior based upon differences upon sexual orientation, through gender, through appearances, through religious beliefs and ideologies. When the Portuguese first landed in Brazil in the 1500s, they described the native people as savages who were rude, who lacked faith, and who had no culture. The white people had judged the natives according to their own belief systems and had called them inferior because they were different. For 400 years, you had the Crusades, where the Christians and the Muslims were fighting each other and killing each other because of their religious beliefs. For 300 years, in the Americas and in Europe, you had the Africans who were enslaved because they looked different. In World War II, Japanese people had enslaved up to 200,000 Korean women so that they could provide sexual comfort to their soldiers. Today, people are still being oppressed across the world. The Jews are being oppressed in Muslim countries. Muslims are being oppressed in China. Chinese people are being oppressed in Indonesia. In 74 countries around the world, it is still illegal to practice homosexuality. I, myself, have faced judgment all my life. I was born in South Korea, but I was shortly abandoned by my birth parents shortly thereafter. I would then spend the next 2.5 years in various orphanages. And then I was adopted into a small conservative town in the United States. I went from a population that was 99% Korean to one that was 99% Caucasian. Everywhere I went, people would remind me in subtle and in not so subtle ways that I was different. People would often ask me, "Where did you learn to speak English so well?" Because apparently, I'm supposed to be speaking English with a broken accent. When people would first meet me, they would say in a very surprised voice, "You're Robert Anderson?" I must not look like a Robert Anderson. What does one look like? Apparently, a 6-foot-tall blonde, Swedish-looking person, or so one person had told me. I once met a stranger who was walking his dog. He looked me straight in the eye, and he said, "I better not bring my dog too close to you, or you might eat him." The message was clear. I didn't belong because I looked different. Now take my experiences and multiply them 100-fold, and this is what you are going to look at in a society of transhumanism, in a world where humans might not look like humans anymore. Imagine you are walking down a street and you pass people who have artificial arms and legs. You pass other people who have the ability to see in the dark. Nobody is speaking to each other because they're all connected to each other through chips and planted in their brains. And they're also connected to the internet. Now, does this all sound like a bunch of science fiction? Actually, every single one of these examples are happening in some form right now. We have for a number of years, been able to have artificial limbs react to neural impulses. But in July 2019, scientists at the National Institute of Singapore announced that they were able to create artificial limbs that could sense things like temperature, pressure, humidity. This is important because it allows you to do little things that you wouldn't normally think about. Things such as being able to break an egg properly. In March 2019, scientists were able to give mice the ability to see into the infrared spectrum by injecting nanoparticles into their eyes. What this means is they were not only able to see visible light, but also heat, which allowed them to see in the dark. And the scientists said that this technology could easily be applied to humans. In October 2018, scientists created what they called BrainNet. This was a computer system that allowed 3 people to play an interactive game with each other using nothing but their thoughts. In July 2016, Elon Musk started up a new company called Neuralink, where he's trying to create an interface between the human brain and computers. And he's going to use this interface to connect the human brain to artificial intelligence. With the recent advances in artificial intelligence, in genetics, in medicine, and in technology in general, we are going to see transhumanism become a reality within just a single generation. And eventually, transhumans could become a majority of the population. This is going to create a number of ethical and social implications. Currently, transhumanism is focused on correcting the wrongs that have gone wrong with the human body. But what happens when instead of correcting things, you start enhancing them beyond what is naturally available? For example, having artificial legs that allow you to run a marathon in under an hour with very little effort. Another thing to consider is what happens when this becomes a lifestyle choice. Currently, as we saw, in the world of genetics, there is a fear that designer babies are just around the corner. But what happens when adults choose to have nanorobots injected into their brains so that their brains could be connected in real time to the internet? Or what about the person who doesn't like the look of their hands, so they have them replaced with artificial ones, with designer ones? And how do you protect the rights of those who don't want to be enhanced? For example, let's say you have a man who has Down syndrome. What happens if he doesn't want the nanorobots or the microchip implanted into their brain to correct whatever is wrong with them so that it functions more like a normal human being? Or the lady who's in a wheelchair, who has artificial legs forced upon her in an effort to save money so they don't have to transform her house to make it wheelchair accessible. How do you prevent transhumanism from increasing the gap between the rich and the poor? Do you realize how reliant we are on our hands? Without them, things that we take for granted become next to impossible to do. Things like dressing yourself, feeding yourself, and even going to the toilet. Now, imagine if the technology was there to replace your hands, but that you were unable to afford them? And how do we prevent militaries across the world from using this to create super soldiers, soldiers who have superhuman strength, who can perform endurance far beyond what is natural, and then have chips implanted into their brains to prevent them from having moral qualms about killing? This is exactly what the United States Army thinks is possible by the year 2050, which they've stated in a report that they released just last week. We are the most advanced species to have ever lived on this planet. We have sent people to the moon. We have sent the rovers to Mars. We have unlocked most of the secrets of DNA. We are extending human lifespans every day. In fact, researchers believe that the first person to live to 150 years old is already alive now. We, as humans, have the capacity to love, the capacity to have compassion, and to be heroic. But we also have the ability to be petty, to be cruel, and to engage in self-destructive behaviors. We must remember that any technology that we intend for good can also be used against us. Those computer chips that could be implanted, or those artificial neurons that would correct dementia, that same technology could be used for mind control. So how do we address these issues? The first step is that we need to put into place the correct frameworks to protect both humans and transhumans. This will start by creating a code of ethics. This code of ethics will be used to define what is allowed and what is not allowed when it comes to transhuman enhancements. It also needs to identify the traits of a human being so that we can protect all humans, no matter how enhanced they are. What happens when you become so enhanced that it becomes impossible to tell where you end and the technology begins? Would you want someone to tell you that you are less than human? We need to support this code of ethics with legislation in every country. And we need to have harsh penalties to strongly discourage people from performing legal activities in this area. And while legislation can change outward behavior, you still need to address the attitudes of society. The second step, therefore, is to find a way to get humans to embrace the technology, to embrace transhumanism. You need to get people to realize all the potential that transhumanism can bring. This can range from having, let's say, a chip implanted into your brain that can perform complex mathematical calculations so that you no longer need to have an advanced degree in math in order to fill out your tax forms. Another example comes from scientists working at the universities of Bath, Auckland, and Zurich, who just announced last week that they have created artificial neurons. And these neurons could be used to replace the ones that are damaged in Alzheimer's patients. Imagine a world where dementia no longer means a person slowly loses their memories and their personalities. In this way, by reinforcing all the benefits that transhumanism can bring, humans could potentially embrace it instead of fear it. The final step is we need to be able to socialize this. In other words, we need to make it available to rich and poor alike. We need transhumanism to be able to close the gap between the two instead of widening it. And there are a number of ways we could do this, whether it's through taxes or donations or some other structures. Whatever it is, we need to start planning for it now. And individual countries can sort out the financing of this within their own borders. But countries around the world need to be working together so that any person in any country can have transhuman enhancements. Transhumanism is coming. We need to start preparing for it now. Any change of this magnitude takes about a generation before it gains traction. When West Germany abolished the death penalty in 1949, over half the population still supported it. And yet, by the year 2000, just 51 years later, less than a quarter of the population still supported it. So in conclusion, transhumanism is coming, and it's coming sooner than you think. We need to start preparing for the ethical and social impacts of it now to ensure that humans and transhumans can live together peacefully. We need to start preparing for the future by learning from the mistakes of our past. The world is getting too small to let petty differences divide us. If we are to survive into the future, we need to work together. This can only be achieved by focusing on the things that make us human instead of focusing on the petty differences that divide us. What is the future of the human species? The future is transhumanism, and the future is now. Obrigado.